7 days. Now, where have we heard that before? From the pen fairy to the dish fairy, or plate fairy, or bowl fairy, Mortal Ouija is yet another Chinese horror movie about an Ouija board and calling spirits. But this isn't Bisian, it's Disian. And she, it, they, I don't know its pronouns, have been watching J-Horror because it does its work in 7 days. Hi, I'm the Artie Dans and welcome to episode 15 of my Chinese horror movie reviews, where I'm going to answer the question, should you watch Mortal Ouija? And a heads up, there's some spoilers as I explain the ending to the movie. Meng Yao can't believe her luck. She's just signed a lease for a large new apartment close to her daughter Wenwen's school. While a bit old and a bit musty, the price is a steal. But the previous tenants have left a storeroom of belongings behind, including the Chinese horror favourite, an Ouija board and the dish required to use it. Meng Yao has an interesting job. She hosts a late night video podcast where she recants ghost stories and tells her audience to listen to another podcast run by her friends who explain supernatural events with science. This is going to be important for later. Wen discovers the Ouija board in the storeroom, and wouldn't you know it, lots of strange things start to happen. Spooky, creepy things. After Wen is hospitalized and ends up in a coma, Meng Yao contacts the lady who used to own the apartment, who tells her about the history of the Ouija board, and that the curse that is woken from the board needs to be passed on to another person within 7 days. Otherwise, they'll die. Yes, the good old 7 days and passing on the curse trope. Now, this is the first time I've seen something like this in a Chinese horror movie, but I'm pretty sure it has been used before. The movie gives the 7-day information early on and has a counter on the screen at various times to tell the audience what day the characters are currently experiencing. It does give off the Ring vibes, except without the grainy VHS tape that causes the curse. Admittedly, this film does what a lot of Chinese horror movies fail to do. It builds tension. Usually they throw in a few horror scenes at the start and the movie will turn into a drama or a thriller by the end, but this film keeps up the horror vibe right throughout. While it was released in 2019 to box office acclaim, indeed this is the 7th highest grossing horror film in the Chinese box office, it was actually filmed in 2015 and completed in 2016. As seems to be the norm with these types of films, it got held up by regulators. We all know by now that China is going to ruin the ending, and luckily, the filmmakers knew this, so they added a few extra scenes to appease the regulators while also keeping up the general horror vibe. It's worth noting that, in China at least, this movie has a rather high user score for a horror film. Chinese audiences know their horror movies are terrible and score them accordingly. This movie has a 5.0 rating, which is low for any other genre of movie except horror, where the average score is about 2.5. Back to the science, there are 2 characters in this movie. Kinda like Mulder and Scully, except they're a mix of both of those characters, instead of one just being Mulder and the other just being Scully, that are called upon to provide some scientific input into what's causing all of the creepy incidents. Actually, with all this equipment that they use, they kind of remind me of those 2 guys from the Insidious movie played by the 2 Australian blokes. And the guy from the Korean movie The Closet, which came out after this film. But you know those types of characters. They have the heat and thermal monitors, cameras, infrared detectors, and all the works. Anyway, what's their conclusion about the creepy incidents occurring? Well, the wind from a window and the ex-husband who had the keys to the apartment dropping off a birthday gift for Wen. A bit anticlimactic actually. For about 95% of the time, this movie is above average, borderlining on good. In reality, to appease the film regulators, the filmmakers have added 2 very unnecessary scenes that could easily be edited out of the film for an international release. The first involves a backstory with the previous owner who's killed her husband and hidden him in the wall. In and of its own, this scene actually builds up the ideas of a decent ending, where the woman wants to ensure that the dead body of her husband is never found. So there's a scene at the end where she enters the apartment to kill Meng Yao and stop her from exposing her as the murderer. And that part I'm okay with. It's just that, well, they need to explain all the ghosts to the audience, because the supernatural element isn't allowed. So it's then explained that the woman was dressing up and scaring them in the apartment as the ghost. This is a typical Chinese horror movie ending, and it's shit. But you could edit those 30 seconds out where she explains this to the police and have an ending that actually keeps the supernatural elements in place. Because the scene before this, which is unnecessary for a different reason, builds up the idea that there is a spirit within the Ouija board. What's unnecessary about this scene is that the filmmakers have added a few shots that imply Meng Yao is a little crazy. Removing those spinning shots and the ridiculous thunderstorm, and you've actually got a really good ending. Because the film then ends on a classic horror movie cliffhanger. A mysterious photo is sent to Meng Yao which divulges the secret of who the ghost is. We, the audience, don't see this photo, but her expression can be read in two different ways. And that depends on the scenes that come directly before it. Using my patent pending ghost rating, which stands for great horror or stupid trash, this movie gets 4 ghosts. Remember, I score these Chinese horror movies against each other, not against proper horror movies, and this movie is really good for a Chinese horror flick. A few tweaks to the ending, and you've got a decent international release that can piggyback off the popularity of The Ring. But that'll never happen. Thank you for watching this video. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to support the channel and keep up to date with my latest videos like this.